This is Mark Drury with Drury Outdoors, and you've accidentally downloaded the Thinking Woodsman podcast.
Well, how cool was that? I can't think of a better way to open a show about turkey hunting than to have Mark Drury gobble for us. Hey everyone, it's your buddy Tim Chelsvik for the Thinking Woodsman podcast, the confluence of humor and conscience in the great outdoors, and we're coming to you from the RedsGear.com studio. Gear up for your next big adventure at RedsGear.com. Well, on this month's show, we're talking about how to be an unintentional outdoor jerk. We're visiting with Ray I and talking about turkey scouting techniques. We've got a super secret discount code for you to use for your next order at RedsGear.com. I'll review a pair of Scentlock Outfitter pants. We also talked to Darrell Stiennen at Select Archery about what being on pro staff really means and what it doesn't mean, in addition to how to make a transition from a wrist-style release to a handheld release. In the What's Cookin' segment, we'll talk about a few different stories that I wrote, some about turkey, some about aging venison. We talk with Head Hangers. These are the guys that create these really simple and rugged European mount brackets. They are slick and they've got a great story to tell. And then in the Will It Kill It segment, we invite an IBM ThinkPad to the Thinking Woodsman backyard bow range and see what happens. Does the arrow deflect completely, partial penetration, or does the arrow get full pass-through? But before we step into the Big Idea segment, the first episode that launched back in February had an overwhelming amount of positive reviews, and I'm humbled and thankful for each and every one of you that has listened and subscribed. I appreciate it, and super excited to be able to continue bringing you this unique perspective on the great outdoors that we all know and love. Let's kick it over into the Big Idea segment, how to be an unintentional outdoors jerk. Take a trip with me back in time to the land of the mid-1990s where Pepsi had just given up on something called Clear Pepsi, and I was not yet having to shave my shoulders every week. I want to tell you about how I was an unintentional jerk, and then segue into how to be an unintentional outdoors jerk. So hang with me here because I think this will make sense. I worked at a grocery store during high school and part of college. One day I was stocking the frozen food section with a young lady named Katie Graham. Katie and I were talking, probably stocking the frozen peas at the time, and Katie said something like, I'd thought about asking you out, Tim, but I didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation. My response was, thank you. And that's all I said. And I promise I honestly was not trying to be a jerk. I did not realize what was happening in the moment. I did not realize she was asking me out. I just thanked her for her politeness and kept stocking those peas. And I don't know at what point in my life I figured out what had actually happened, but I feel terrible about it. But I think that there are a number of things that we do as outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen where we are unintentional jerks to our brothers and sisters in this family of outdoor pursuers. And I have a list going, so I want to give some examples of these. The first example, it's called slacktivism. It's the guys and ladies on the internet that, because they have the anonymity of a keyboard, will look at a picture. So let's say you shot a nice deer and you posted a picture of it. Invariably, if you are an unintentional outdoors jerk, you will say something like, it looks like the shot was a little far back, or something about shot placement. They cannot not make a comment about that. And whether they do it on purpose or not, if you're taking a picture of a deer, chances are you killed it. Chances are maybe it wasn't the best shot, but the deer died. So the whole shot placement comment is not necessary. Please think twice about making that comment. The other way you can be an unintentional outdoor jerk is to be a gear snob. Listen, there are a range of income levels represented in the outdoor community. And some of us scrape the money together to buy the best bow we can, and the money we scrape together, that may be a $200 used rig off an archery shop wall, or it could be one of the flagship models that costs over $1,000 just the bare bow. But for anyone to downplay someone's ability or importance or effectiveness as an outdoorsman because of how much they did not spend on their rig is ridiculous. Please stop doing that. First off, you may not want to get in a shootout with one of these guys because they may be an old salt that knows 90% of deer hunting, and being a hunter and a woodsman in and of itself is about the person, not the equipment. The other thing is maybe that's all they could afford. And maybe the fact is you are over-equipped because you spent way too much on gear that you are not qualified to touch because you don't put the time or skill into learning. So please do not be a gear snob. It makes you an outdoors jerk. There's another, hang with me on this one. This one is a little more nuanced. And I've seen people do this in various sectors, but the people that will ask you a question only to answer it for themselves. Case in point, someone asks you, well, how high do you hang your deer stands? And just as you open your mouth, they say, well, because I only hang my stands at least 20 feet up or more on a tree. And then they go on to talk about the deer they've killed and how high they hang their stands in cedar trees. And they just go on. And you realize at some point as you're listening to them that they only asked you that question because it was a launching point for them to start talking about their abilities as an outdoorsman. That drives me nuts. If you listen, you will learn things. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. My buddy Chris Brackett likes to say that. So we're designed to listen more than we are to talk. Don't ask people questions just to tell your own story. The next one is something that happened to me, and this is, I had a delayed response to this. I didn't really realize what happened until maybe an hour after the conversation, and I fully admit that I'm not the quickest arrow in the quiver. I showed a guy a picture of a deer I killed a few years back. It was a buck. And as he's looking at, we're kind of looking at deer pictures on our phones, and he asks me if it was the first buck I'd ever killed. And I said, no, it wasn't. I've killed a number of bucks. And it wasn't until much later that I started to wonder and think that, I think he was making a comment about maybe it was a small deer. And I only shot it because I'd never killed a buck before, and that was what I was happy with. And all of a sudden, that great interaction I had with a fellow deer hunter kind of turned a little sour. I don't know for sure if that was his motive, but it sure felt like it after the fact. People kill different sizes of animals. Some people have different levels of access to quality land. You don't want to downplay someone else's animal, because you just don't know the circumstances that went into it. Here's another one that if you want to spend an hour online reading through back and forths on internet forums, first off, I don't have the time to spend arguing with people on internet forums. I've been baited, and people have tried to get me into those conversations. First off, I don't think they change anyone's minds, and most of the time, people aren't truly reading what the other person is writing enough to understand. And a lot of times people can't write well enough to even be understood in the first place. There's just not much good comes from it. But when people confuse their opinions with facts, and one of the greatest examples of this is when people start talking about calibers. What's the best round to take down a deer? What's the best shot size for turkey? These questions, they have answers. They're typically the answer that has to do with what you can afford, what you can get your hands on, and what gets the job done. Beyond that, there's a lot of preference involved. But the people that cannot distinguish their preference from facts, I just have very little time for. And as an outdoorsman, we have to be discerning in who we listen to and how we internalize what they're telling us. Even the things that I say, I hope that you're being critical and you're thinking through what I'm saying and not just taking it for gospel. Another example of this, I started to read an internet forum. I was doing research on aging deer and what the long end of aging a deer would be in terms of time. And I got onto this. It was a fieldandstream.com forum. And two of the main voices in this conversation were adamant about, I don't know why anyone bothers hanging a deer to let it age. It's just rotting. I don't know why anyone would let their deer rot and then eat it. Well, they were so adamant that the aging a deer was really rotting, that they weren't open to listen to other people's points of views. They had confused their opinion with fact, and in fact, what they ended up having was a wrong fact, and that aging is not rotting. The next thing that people can do to be an unintentional outdoors jerk is to be incapable of hearing a compliment without mistaking it as a complete endorsement. What I mean by that is, let's say, for example, I like something new that Hoyt is doing with their risers. I'm not shooting Hoyt right now. I have nothing against them, but maybe I like one particular thing that they're doing with their risers in 2017. And then someone picks up on that and they think, oh, you must be a Hoyt fanboy. I made no larger statement. I just complimented one aspect of their product. Same thing with about outdoor celebrities or food. It's possible to compliment one aspect of a thing without giving it a 100% endorsement. Another example is the presidential election right now. It's possible to like various aspects of other candidates without fully endorsing their entire platform. We need to be able to think and chew gum at the same time enough to be able to look at these pieces and decide what you like, what you agree with, and what you don't agree with. Just because you like one aspect doesn't mean that you like the whole thing. We have to be able to make those distinctions. Finally, I don't know of a better way to typify this person. They are the topper, the person that no matter what you've done or experienced, they have something better or different than you could ever hope to imagine. And I knew a kid growing up in school that was such a topper that he just lied all the time. At first it was just stunning because you couldn't believe it. I had a tennis racket as a kid. This kid said, oh yeah, I have a tennis racket too. I was like, oh yeah, what kind? And he says, well, what's the best kind? Because that's the one that I have. Everything was, you have 10 of something, I have 12. You've run 5 miles? Yeah, I've run 8 miles. But the people that cannot be happy for someone's own accomplishments without topping it with their own, typically made up or exaggerated accomplishment. We can be happy for other people. I fully recognize that there is an unspoken competition between outdoorsmen. I get it. I don't like it. I wrote about it in an article called Your Buck Makes Me Sick, How to Deal with Antler Envy. Even when your best friend kills a great buck, you still wish that it was you. I get it. There's that kind of down deep inside, we want it to be us for everything. But in reality, there's no competition. If someone does something great, has some milestone, shoots a great deer, be happy for them. And don't try to top it. Let them live in their accomplishment, and you be happy with where you are. You will be happier. I do not know a topper who is happy or satisfied with their life. So that's my world of unintentional outdoors jerks. And I hope that I kind of brought that full circle for everyone from back in the 90s where I had unknowingly been asked out and was an unintentional jerk back to that young lady, Katie Graham, who I'm sure she's not listening now, but I apologize sincerely if you are. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm hoping that my brothers and sisters in the outdoor community, when they do these things, hopefully are doing them unintentionally. If you are doing them, now you know, and now you know that you can stop. And that's this month's big idea. All right, everybody. I'm proud to have my buddy Ray I, an outdoor legend, with me today in the studio. Ray's been turkey hunting on TV probably longer than I've been alive.
Probably.
And not only is he an incredible turkey hunter, he is the consummate outdoorsman. He hunts for pretty much everything that crawls, flies,
breeze, furs, feathers. I don't care. I hunt it.
So, Ray, first off, I wanted to say thank you. Ray has been a great inspiration to me and a great help and a great friend as I get my start in outdoor media. So, Ray, thank you for your extraordinary kindness.
You're more than welcome, and obviously you need the help.
It's true. I will not disagree. I'm stumbling my way through this, but I appreciate it. But, hey, so it's March, and turkey season, turkey season is right around the corner. It's your time to shine. As guys are thinking about getting out in the woods and scouting, how much does preseason scouting now really reflect the reality of turkey patterns during the April and May season?
Oh, it depends on when your season is. March, what you're doing in March. If your season is not till April or May, you can go out and look at your area and learn the terrain differences. The best thing to scout in March is, even before March, is if you're going to a new area, go in where there's no understory, no leaves hanging on trees. We can see the terrain. So later on in April or May, when you go hunting, you can know where to set up and know what's out ahead of you. You can't see it when it's all leafed up. But there is a difference in March compared to hunting in April, because your turkeys in March in places where the season's April are pretty much still in bunches or flocks. They could be in breakup. But you can learn the area, and you can learn the area that the turkeys are using in March, but during breakup, that's going to change. So it never hurts to scout year-round in the area you're going to hunt, but there will be a difference in a pattern of turkeys because they'll break up in late March into early April if the season is April or May.
You've always been a proponent of time in the woods.
Oh, you got to spend time in the woods. If you're going to be successful, spend time in the woods. It's difficult for some people working to get the time in the woods, but man, you got to find that time. You got to get in the woods. And then the thing is, if you can watch the turkeys, where they roost, where they go during the middle of the day, areas, direction of travel, where they feed, that's going to help you even later in April and May.
So how close can you get scouting birds without bumping them off their normal patterns?
I love that. I kind of mess people's minds up with this because I like to get in like really tight and videotape them in March on the roost and flying down. Just be careful and don't scare them a lot. I mean, turkeys are going to get bumped by coyotes and other things in the wild, and every once in a while you'll spook a turkey. But in my experience of scouting turkeys, very seldom do I scare the turkeys, and I love to watch them from a distance first of all, and watch where they go. Where do they go when they leave the roost? What direction do they travel? What time where are they at 10 o'clock? But you can watch it. But I love getting in tight on a roost to scout and setting up and run a video camera and listen and watch them on the roost and watch where they go when they leave the roost and watch which direction they come into the roost in the evening. I do all that scouting. I do extensive scouting for my media hunts and for television shows because you got to know the turkeys and direction of travel and where they're going to be at certain times if you're going to do any good. So how close do I get? Sometimes right up underneath the trees. And other times I'll stay back 100 or 200 yards. There's many times if it's open country, I'll set up with a video camera on a big hillside where I can videotape the turkey's pattern and watch them in the valleys and the open fields and direction of travel. But I don't worry too much about bumping turkeys. If it happens, it happens because other things bump turkeys and scare turkeys, and they'll go back to their normal. You're not going to mess them up for your season. Okay.
What kind of memory do you think turkeys have? If you get in and make a little noise getting into your stand?
Nah, that's not going to be a big deal. The turkey is just a turkey. They react to something right at the moment, and about 10 minutes later, they're back to eating bugs and poop, and they're okay.
Right, pretty simple creatures. Yeah. For guys that are bow hunting turkeys, can you do everything you need with a diaphragm call, or do you need to have a box call or a slate call with you?
That's up to the individual. You can get away with anything you need with a mouth call, of course. And I know the old adage was that your hands are free, but I've called turkeys in with a box and a slate call during the fall and spring and shot them with a bow, set the call down when the turkey gets close. But you can use whatever works best for you. I like a combination of calls because it sounds more realistic, sounds like different voices, more turkeys. But diaphragm is absolute killer with a bow, of course, because you do have your hands on the bow and you can still call when the turkey gets close. But I've called them in and killed them with a box and a slate with a bow. But you can mix and match and use your different calls depending on the situation, time of year, where you're hunting.
So what do you think about the rise in popularity of these the decoys that guys hold and kind of crawl out towards the turkeys? Are those safe or?
Well, I could do a whole deal on that. No, I don't think it's very safe. I'm from the era of hunter education. I was an instructor for instructors for hunter education, and I taught everywhere I went about hunter safety and mistaken for game. I've also been a professional witness in court sessions where someone shot a guy's decoy, shot him, and accidents happen. I can tell you a little bit of brief, quick history on that. This is nothing new. The fanning deal, the Indians did it. We did it back in the 70s. Actually, I knew a guy in the 70s that took a goose decoy and skinned his turkey that he killed in the spring and put the feathers on a goose decoy body and then put the tail on it and set it out. It was very successful. But his guys he hunted with made him quit, told him he was cheating. That's not how you hunt turkeys. That's unfair. You got to call a turkey like a man. Mano. But then there was a guy that came out with a fan with eye holes in it and a handle, and he had a rubber head on it. And I took that to Bass Pro, Flambeau, Hunter Specialties, numerous companies in the mid-'80s, and nobody would touch it because of liability insurance. And, of course, this guy, I said, get rid of the eye holes. You don't want to have this in front of your face and go to turkeys. Now, we have taken, even in the 70s, we'll take a turkey fan and hold it up or stick it on a stick right out in front of us on the break of a hill when the gobblers were with hens, and it worked. And decoys can work. But you got to remember, when the hen decoys came out, companies didn't want people to use them because of liability. I'm not for the guy taking a fan and crawling around the field with a loaded gun. I just don't think it's safe. I don't think, I kind of call it a gimmick. Yeah, it works because of the turkey's pecking order and challenging a gobbler with hens. But you can do the same thing with gobbler yelping. Sure. And you do the same thing with a basic strutting decoy. Of course, strutting decoys, I go back to the same thing I told you earlier. There was times that nobody touched a strutting decoy. They said it was too dangerous. And actually, the guy that I just went to court for last year as a professional witness, he was shot in the face using a strutting decoy that just was sitting on a stake. Guy came up out of the woods and raised up, saw it, and shot the decoy and shot him behind the decoy. So you can't be too careful. We taught never wear red, white, and blue when you're turkey hunting. Always positively identify your target. This was a big deal in the 1980s, late 70s, 80s, and 90s about hunter safety, and now you just go out there and crawl around the field with a loaded gun and a turkey fan. Nah, why don't you just do that deer season? Put on a deer hide and a big set of antlers and take a deer head and push it out in front of you. I mean, if you're going to use decoys, set up in a situation where the decoys are out in the open and you're back where you can see all around you and see anybody's approach. Yeah. Don't go crawling through a field behind a damn fan.
And you think about the lowest common denominator of a guy out there hunting, and would they be able to process? They see a fan that could be a guy.
Yeah, and also it's a lot of extra work. Why break from what works? Hen yelping 99% of the times kills turkeys. So why you want to crawl around with a fan?
Right. So you have the benefit of years of experience and seeing things evolve in the hunting industry. Over your time in the hunting industry, what do you think? Like right now, where we stand, what do you think are the gaps? We've got coverage wall to wall. We've got people online streaming media.
There's all kinds of good stuff. I don't know if it's gaps. There's so much coverage, but it's not as, I don't think a lot of it's as good as coverage as we used to have. Journalism, ability to write skills, communication skills. Now anybody can go on the internet and write anything they want. Anybody can do a podcast and say anything they want. No reflection.
You're looking at me.
Yeah, sorry about that. But, there was a time and a place, if you had a magazine article published, you had to earn that and be able to have the talent and ability to communicate properly. Same thing with having a videotape or writing a book or doing a radio show. Now it's just, there's tons of it out there. Now you got too much more to sift through. One of the things that I see that's really changed is the reporters, as I call them, journalism guys back in the day reported. I mean, they went in and did serious investigating. I had guys follow me around the woods with a notepad. And what I see now more so than actual reporting is people talking about themselves and how great they are and how good they are and everything that they know and how wonderful a hunter they are and how successful they are. They got a wall full of deer horns. Look what I did. Instead of sharing and teaching with others. That's a big difference I see in today's media. I see too much of this. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Back when we were doing this stuff, we didn't have none of this electronic media. There wasn't even any television. Video was new. Sure. VHS. So, us guys that went out, we did public appearances and we were in newspapers and magazines. That was where we were at.
Just for folks that are wondering what VHS is, it's a type of video cassette that you put in a video cassette recorder machine that plays video on television. Well, Ray, you've definitely killed your share of animals, caught your share of fish. What impresses you about other outdoorsmen? When you meet someone, you think,
there's a few good ones out there. Well, there's a lot of good ones, and there's a lot of bad ones. It's just the way it is. And anything, not just in hunting and the outdoors. But what I see in an outdoorsman are one of these outdoor professional or just a normal everyday guy that works and goes hunting, is the person that has that passion for hunting in the outdoors and is willing to share it with others. Those are the ones that I really enjoy. The one that's not going, look at me, look at me. It's the guy that's going, hey, you know, I got to work 6 days this week, but why don't I take your kid hunting on Sunday? Those are the guys I look up to.
And that will make the generational impact that we need on our sport. Well, Ray, thank you for joining me. RayI.com. You can pick up the Turkey Hunting Bible and his DVD series, Calling is Everything. Guy knows how to kill a bird. So if you're interested in learning more about turkey hunting, check out RayI.com. Ray, thanks.
Hey, you're welcome, Tim.
Obviously, we're talking this month about turkey hunting, and if you're like me, you start thinking about the gear that you need a few months before the season starts, and I know you're probably no different. If you're thinking about getting some more or some different calls, a new turkey hunting vest, maybe some new camo, we've got a great deal for you, and Kristen from RedsGear.com is here to tell you about it.
Thank you. RedsGear.com
You're
wants
welcome.
to help you with preseason planning for all of your spring turkey hunts. So we're offering a code for 10% off all your gear. The code is SPRINGTURKEY.
And if you tell anyone what that code is, we will come after you and we will hurt you. It's a secret code for the Thinking Woodsman podcast listeners. Right? I mean,
Correct.
Kristen, you'll come after these people.
I will personally visit your house.
Mm-hmm. Unpleasantly. So, the code, Spring Turkey, right?
The code is SPRINGTURKEY, all
Okay.
one word.
So not only do you get the benefit of Reds Gear's already great prices, their free shipping, but you also get 10% off your order price, which will save you money so you can go ahead and buy your turkey tail and beard mounting plaque once you finally kill that gobbler. That sounds like a good deal. RedsGear.com, Spring Turkey, that's the discount code, save 10%. Kristen, thanks.
Thank you.
People, let me tell you about some nice pants. That is a throwback to the 1970s TV series, The Courtship of Eddie's Father, about a young boy being raised by the Hulk. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's solid television. But I'm not here to talk to you about television. I'm here to talk to you about the Scentlock Outfitter pair of pants I bought this past year from RedsGear.com. They're nice pants, but they ain't cheap. They retail for around $170, but with that $170, you get a durable pair of pants that are rainproof and windproof. They have scent blockers, rain blocker, semi-permeable membrane in them. Now, what you have to remember, though, even though the pants are 100% waterproof, they're a soft shell. They're the system layer 3 aspect of scent blocker's system approach to layering, which is system layer 3 is an external layer. They're a soft shell, though, so while they're quiet, that's about as loud as you'll get out of them. Because they're a soft shell, when they get wet, they get a little heavy, and even if you don't have a base layer between you and the pants, they might feel wet, but really you're just feeling that cold from the rain-soaked exterior. There's no way of saying this without sounding weird, but I love diamond gusseted crotches on pants. There, I said it. And the reason I love them is because they fit so well and they flex perfectly. This is where a manufacturer will sew in a diamond shape in the seams between the legs, and what that does is it provides kind of more of a natural shape. Gosh, I'm just kind of talking myself into a corner here, but trust me, they reduce stress on those seams and they fit much better than a standard pair of pants. I appreciate that. They also have what Scent Blocker is referring to as late season fit, and in my world, late season fit means it's after Thanksgiving, it's after Christmas, and you've eaten too much and need some extra real estate around the waist. The reality is these have a buckle system on either side of the pair of pants around the waist that you can either tighten up or loosen depending on what kind of layers you have on underneath. What I did with these pants this year, I wore them late October through the rest of the season, but once it got down to where the temperatures were in the 30s and below, I would wear these pants with a layer underneath, but also put on a pair of overalls over them, because they're not insulated. They're warm, and in fact, sometimes when I was climbing some of the ridges to get to my more distant stands, I had to stop and cool down a little bit because they can get a little warm when you're hiking, but they're not insulated. There's 3 layers, so you've got the external layer with the camo print on them, the semi-permeable rain blocker / wind blocker layer in between, and then you've got the fabric liner. So that's 3 layers of material here that kind of stacks up to be something like insulation, but they're not super, super warm pants. They're not designed to be. You can find them in mossy oak and in Realtree. They've got cargo pockets near the knees that have a cool feature. It's 1 pocket on each side, but there are 2 ways to get into it. You can get in from the top, like if you're standing, there's a couple different buttons that you just pop open, get into the pocket. But while you're sitting, which, most of us that are in the tree stands, we spend a lot of our time sitting, they've got a zipper along kind of the inside, the inseam of the pocket, so you can get at the same gear that's in there, but not have to stand up or straighten your leg out. Kind of a neat thing that they thought of. The cuffs have an elastic band around them and a button and a zipper that allow you to open up that cuff to accommodate larger boots. That's a helpful feature, especially if you're trying to kick your boots on or off, or if you're trying to get your pants on without taking your boots off. And I've done that if it's exceptionally cold. I'll try to do that without taking my boots off. The Scentlock Outfitter pants do have Scent Blocker's proprietary Trinity technology, odor-reducing technology. I'm not convinced that any clothing material yet will 100% mitigate human odors. Does it help? Maybe, but I'm not buying these pants because I think they're going to totally mask my human odor in the woods. In fact, I have spooked deer with these pants on. I bought them because I think they're a quality piece of garment, and they have been so far. The one problem I did have with these pants is that the button closure up around the waist is redundant. There are 2 buttons along with the zipper to close them. The first time I ordered these pants, the female side on the button closure came off. So I was still able to wear them. I just only had 1 button up at the top along with the zipper. For $170, I figure the pants should not lose a button like that. Sent them back to RedsGear.com. They quickly returned me a brand new pair, and I hunted with them for the rest of the season, and they've been perfect. So probably just a fluky thing, but I thought I'd mention it nonetheless. The zippers are Y2K zippers. That's a great brand. They're solid zippers. They operate well. They operate quietly. Overall, a great pair of rainproof, windproof pants, albeit a little pricey, again around $170. They're quiet. You can find them in Mossy Oak and Realtree on RedsGear.com. As promised, I got my buddy Darrell Stiennen on the line. Darrell is joining us from Normal, Illinois. Darrell, welcome aboard.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks again for joining us. Darrell's going to talk about a few different things on the show today. But first off, I realized, Darrell, I may not have done that great of a job introducing you during the February episode. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about your experience as an archer and kind of who you're shooting for and what that means right now?
Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the industry for probably 7 to 10 years now. You kind of lose track, either working at shops, running tech departments, running shops, and now as a shop owner. For about 3 years, I've been on Mathews Factory Pro staff, shooting for Mathews, traveling, competing all over the place. I'm an avid bow hunter at home. I've got a couple of tournaments on my belt, but mostly it's just competing and having fun and spreading the good word about archery and about the products and the companies that I work well with and love.
So I can't go out and just buy that cool Mathews shirt that you have. You have to earn that, apparently.
Yeah, no, they call you on that one. That's it was
Come
a big
on.
honor. Yeah, it was a big honor. It was one of those things that I hadn't expected. I hadn't sought it out, but they contacted me and asked me if I was interested in a position, and that's a hard one to turn down right there. It's a great company. I believe wholeheartedly in everything they do and the way they run their business, and I'm proud to support them and proud to be on their staff.
Well, here's a question for you. Can I buy your shirt from you?
My old shirts? Sure, yeah, we can work on something. They have my name all over it, but that might be a little big
I don't
for
mind.
you too. But
I'll change my last name if I can wear a staff shooter shirt.
Sure.
That's fine.
the position's a little more than the shirt. It really is. You have to be an ambassador. You have to be not only loyal to the company and their products, but you have to be good at telling people why it's a good company and why it's a good product. And the fact that I own a shop doesn't hurt. You know what I mean? It's I have access to a lot of customers. I have influence in my community here, in the archery community locally. So I'm a good fit for them, and I feel like they're a great fit for me. So it kind of works both ways.
You know, you posted something earlier this month on Facebook. It was a meme about being on pro staff. So I think that's a great segue, because I'm not sure that everyone fully understands what being on pro staff means.
Sure.
Regardless of whether it's for a shop or a broadhead company or an arrow manufacturer, can you help kind of clear the air about what being on pro staff means and maybe even what it doesn't mean?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Kind of one of the misnomers, when you see pro staff, people assume professional staff. That's not what it is. It's promotional staff. So, I mean, that's your role. When you're on a company's promotional staff, you need to promote that company. You need to be loyal to that company. If you want to sign that contract, and I take this very seriously, this is kind of one of my pet peeves in the industry. When you sign that contract and you agree to work with that company and to promote that company, you need to take it seriously. It's one of those things where it's pretty easy to, because there are companies out there. There are arrow manufacturers, there's stabilizer manufacturers. There's companies out there who want to build a giant promotional staff. They want a lot of people on staff to kind of help spread the word. It's an advertising technique, and it works well for some companies out there. There are more exclusive groups as well. But you have to remember, anytime you're signing any of those, even if it's one that is available to everyone, as soon as you sign that contract, as soon as you take that discount or take that product, take it seriously. Make sure that you do your part for that company. They're paying you, and essentially to help them promote their product, and you should take that seriously.
Yeah, so you're being compensated not even necessarily because you may be the best bow hunter or best whatever in the world,
Right?
But they're assuming that you're going to be a good representative for their brand. Now, I imagine that there are probably some warning signs as if you're a hunter, there may be some warning signs about maybe this brand isn't as exclusive, and they're just kind of taking anybody that's willing to shoot their broadheads or
Right.
whatever it is. What's a good kind of yellow flag for an average Joe hunter that maybe wants to take the next step and try to be on pro staff somewhere?
Sure. And there's there's kind of a stigma to pro staff anymore, it seems. There's kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, because some people do abuse the privilege. There's even the companies who will take anyone and everyone. As I said before, that's an advertising strategy, and it's not a bad one necessarily. But once you sign that dotted line, you have to respect the responsibility of being on that professional staff or that promotional staff. So you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You have to, if you're we'll say it's Arrow X that you're signing up for, and Arrow X is not very exclusive. The Arrow X will let anyone sign up on their staff. They encourage anyone to sign up their staff. It's a discount promotional staff. You should still treat that as though they contacted you. Treat it seriously, treat it professionally, because that's what companies are looking for. So the more exclusive pro staffs, the ones that aren't available to everyone, they'll look into that. If you're on staff with a company, they might check that reference. They might check your social media and see if you're actually doing what you said you're doing. And I guess my biggest pet peeve is folks signing on that dotted line with no intention of respecting that exclusivity, because that's what you're signing away, is the ability to play with products. I've been approached by site companies. I've been approached by release companies to shoot on their promotional staffs. For the most part, I turn them down, not because I have any problem with their sites or have any problem with their releases or anything like that. But I personally like to play. I'm like we talked about before. I'm an archery nerd, and I like to play with all of them. And I like to have the ability to be unbiased in my opinion about all of them.
Especially because you're selling most of these products, so you I
Exactly.
imagine you want to have some semblance of objectivity when it comes to that.
Right. Oh, and absolutely, and I tell everyone who comes into my shop, listen, I am biased toward Mathews, not only because I'm on the promotional staff, but also because of their factory staff, is because I believe in the company and I really do enjoy their products. So I mean, regardless if I was on their staff, that's where my preference is. It's where my loyalties lie for the most part. That's not to say that I try to sell everyone a Mathews bow when they come into the shop. But I'm honest when people come in. They ask what I shoot and why, and I'll tell them.
Yeah, and Mathews is leveraging your credibility as a strong shooter and a good ambassador, so it works on both sides. But it's probably a good idea if you are on pro staff somewhere to not introduce yourself to people as pro staff or whatever, because that I think kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. It's like, okay, well,
and that's where the abuse, that's where the abuse comes in. That's where the stigma comes from. Is people, and really, it started on some of the social medias and the chat forums where even as part of your signature, you're listing all the staffs you're on, or it should be, and that's part of your job is to get the word out there about your product. But there's more subtle ways to do it than that, I guess, than screaming to the world about every one of your sponsors and what they do for you and everything.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of like telling people that you have a podcast.
No, you need to be telling people you have a podcast. Can I be on your pro staff?
Yeah, you can be on my pro staff.
Thinking Woodsman?
Yeah,
all right, you're going on the jersey.
Yeah, I'll send you the contract. Having a podcast just means you have an internet connection and a microphone.
Right.
It's whether or not you have a successful show. That's a whole different level.
Sure,
but we actually didn't intend to set out talking about pro staff, but it was just kind of a great thing to discuss. Originally, it's springtime or about to be springtime in lots of parts of the country, and I know, like, if I'm thinking about changing something on my rig at any point during the year, it's probably going to be this time, because I got some time before spring turkeys. I got quite a bit of time before deer season starts up again, and now's the time to make some changes. And what I'd like to do is talk about the pros and cons and how to transition from a wrist style release to a handheld release, like a thumb release. 'Cause I know they're gaining in popularity for hunting.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about, from your perspective, Darrell, pros and cons, and then what it's like to transition.
For me, there's no better release. There's archers out there that beat me consistently with a wrist release. I prefer a hinge release. It's more of a back tension style release. But every release that's out there should be taught and shot with some measure of back tension as part of the form. They can all be shot properly. They can all be shot well. There are some advantages and disadvantages to either, though.
Darrell, just real quick, for folks that are wondering what back tension is when you're kind of pulling your shoulder blades together, and you kind of always have. It's not like you stop pulling when you hit the wall. It's like you're still pulling into that
constant
shot.
Motion. Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's a constant motion. So and more than anything, you're holding shoulder. That shoulder blade will not necessarily lock, but will stay motionless, and your release hand shoulder blade will rotate toward your spine. And it's a continual process. It's not something that you begin once you get to full draw, or and it's a tricky one to master. It's a tricky one to try to figure out on your own too. I do generally recommend get some coaching help on that one. Get even a buddy with a camera to show you what you're doing. Makes a huge difference when you're trying to get that worked out. And again, it doesn't matter what kind of release you shoot. You can have proper form with all three types of release.
Darrell, are there any high level archers right now that are shooting like a trigger style, like a wrist style release, or have they all
absolutely.
transitioned?
Yeah, no, it's going to be less common to see a gentleman with or a lady with a wrist style release on the circuit stuff in the ASAs and in the Pro-Ams, but they're out there. Danny Evans in the Champaign area shoots a wrist style release at a very high level. He was top 10 shooter of the year in the ASA last year. Steve Worf is a senior pro. Same thing, Champaign area, shoots a wrist release. They consistently shoot circles around me with their wrist release as opposed to my hinge. So it's not to say one's necessarily better than the other. Some are easier, I think, to shoot in a back tension setting, but it's there's no better. There are advantages to both.
Yeah. What do you think about a handheld style release out in the deer stand or out in the blind?
I absolutely love them. I shoot a hinge on the tournament trails, but when I get into the woods, I shoot a thumb style release. The nice thing about the thumb style release for me is you can leave it hang on the D-loop. So your bow is hanging on the hanger, your arrow's knocked, ready to go, and the release can just hang there on the D-loop. So in one motion, you can grab the bow, the release, and come to draw without having to fiddle around and hook into the D-loop or anything like that, which is nice. The other thing I like about the thumb is they're a little more customizable as far as hand shape, feel. Generally, you have more options as far as trigger location, tension. There are some very good wrist releases on the market right now that'll give you some of that. But the thumbs generally give you a little more customization as far as your shot and the way you like that hand feel.
Okay. Now, punching yourself in the face.
Sure. Happens.
It seems to be like a real thing that happens when guys transition over to a handheld release.
Yes. There's a couple ways to avoid that. There's a couple of good products out there right now. Saunders Archery makes one called a firing line. Most good shops will have a firing line in the shop. Generally, if I've got somebody trying a release for the first time, I'll put them on the firing line, which is it simulates bow tension, but it doesn't have that sudden snap or that sudden release. And it's designed. You can set it up for an individual's draw length. They can draw into their anchor, as it were. There's no real string angle, but they can draw to their anchor, and they can really kind of play with getting the feel for that before they get out in the range and put it on their actual bow. Because you will punch yourself in the face harder than you've ever been hit before when you try and fail with a back tension release or a thumb.
If someone's going to punch you in the face, it might as well be yourself, I guess.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. There's only one person you can get mad at.
Well, can you go out to your local archery shop or RedsGear.com and get your handheld release and start shooting, or are you going to have to make some adjustments to your D-loop, your peep, anything like that?
Generally, you're going to have to make some adjustments. Most of the handheld or thumb releases out there are going to put that string apex much closer to your hand. And it really depends on how you shoot your trigger release. I generally, if I'm coaching somebody with a trigger release, I have them shorten that release up pretty short, so it's not too far off from a thumb to shoot it properly. But if you're shooting a long trigger and really extending and reaching for that trigger finger, then that string is going to be much closer to your hand with a thumb style release. And it's kind of hard to explain over a podcast, but when you're at your full anchor and your hand's touching your face, with the thumb style release, that string is almost touching your hand. With the wrist style release,
a lot closer.
Right. With the wrist style release, you're having to extend that finger, and you've got 2.5-3 inches between where your hand is anchored and where that string ends. So you can either change the draw length on the bow. Generally, you're going to either change the draw length of the bow. You're going to slide your anchor down and bring your hand under your chin rather than on your cheek, which would cause that peep to go way up and the point of impact to go way up. Or else you just kind of mash that release hand into your face, which is not one we recommend, but we see it from time to time.
Okay. So anchor point and just the way the string looks, so you're probably going to have to get your peep moved up or down. Yeah,
peep's generally going to have to go up. Generally, we see that peep go up as that anchor point drops.
Okay, that makes sense. Darrell, if a guy is shooting decently with a wrist style release, would you counsel him to change over to a handheld release if he's shooting okay? Is there any benefit outside of what he may be already experiencing with the trigger release?
I guess it really depends on which trigger release he's shooting. Generally, if you're shooting one of the price point trigger releases, you can generally outshoot that release. If you shoot it well, you can shoot better. There are some, like I said, more refined trigger releases out there. Some that have a target sear or a spring-loaded trigger on it, so there's no creep in that trigger. There's no kind of dwell period between when you start to pull and when it actually engages, which is what most of the thumb triggers give you. And I tell you the same thing about the thumb triggers. I don't generally recommend running out and finding the cheapest one you can find just so you have a thumb. So if you go from a good wrist release to a price point thumb trigger, you're probably going to go backwards in
Don't
your
downgrade.
shooting. Right, and generally don't move laterally either. If you're going to move from a decent wrist release, you're going to want to upgrade.
And Darrell, what's the price point on a decent wrist style release?
You're gonna spend a little bit of money with a decent wrist style. Some of the True Ball Boss X, some of the Carters that have a trigger style or a target style sear are going to run you in that 150 to 160. The Hardcore from True Fire is going to run you about 109 to 120 depending on the options you have on it. I think the Hardcore Max is about 119, and it's got some really good options. It's got a lot of good adjustability on it too. So it's not going to cost $200-300 like some of the wrists, or some of the handhelds and the hinges, but they are quite a bit pricier than your price point Cobras and your price point True Fires, things like that.
So this is the time of year to make those changes because you got some time before turkey season. You got summer to get used to it, because there's not only does the geometry on your form probably change a little bit, but also the settings on your bow. So you definitely want to give yourself time to ease into that and get confident. Right.
It'll generally change your entire shot cycle, and you really will see a dramatic change in the way you shoot going from one to the other. We have folks that come to us in September, October, and want to make a switch, a dramatic switch like that. And some archers can handle it. Some archers shoot enough to where they can get it down pretty quick. But on the whole, we generally recommend they get through the hunting season where they're comfortable before they make a major change like that. This is exactly the time of year to do it. Early spring, play with it through the summer, shoot your 3D, shoot your tournament stuff, and kind of make your changes there and really get comfortable with it before next fall. Because, that's the last thing you want is to have a mishap with it in a tree stand. You don't want to bump that trigger on the way back or over-rotate that hinge as you're drawing on a beautiful deer or any deer, for that matter.
I punched myself one time in the face in the deer stand, probably 20 feet up in the air, and it wasn't because I was transitioning to a different release. It was my wrist style release. It was just that the sear just rolled over, and it's the most unnerving thing to have happen in the deer stand because I was in my climber, which is kind of fully surrounded. I have a Summit climber.
Yes.
And I really thought I was going overboard. I really did.
Yeah, it can be very dangerous. There's a lot of momentum that goes with your fist as you're coming to full draw.
If I ever need to knock myself out, I can do it. Well, Darrell, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
We got to talk about a lot. We got to talk about being on pro staff, what that's really about, and transitioning over to a handheld style release. Darrell, if folks want to get a hold of you or stop into the shop, how do they do that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, we're at Select Archery. Find us on Facebook, Select Archery. We try to post at least every day the little tidbits, and there's a lot of good coaches out there with a lot we kind of have a pulse on. So we put a lot of good content there. Or else call us at the shop, 309-862-2697. If you have any questions at all, we're more than happy to help. Or stop in. We're in Normal, Illinois, 474 Wiley Drive.
Yeah, and Darrell, one thing I forgot to mention when I was introducing you during the February episode.
Yes, sir.
I kind of forgot about this, but you and I went to prom together in high school.
Not really together as much as at the same time. The same prom. We were at the same prom. In the same pictures.
Ipso facto.
Right. Tomato, right?
Yeah. Okay, Darrell, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim.
All right, gang, this is the Thinking Woodsman podcast. Is that there are some things changing and developments on the horizon for the Thinking Woodsman brand, particularly some of the places and people that I'm writing with and for and doing some media work with. And I would love to share those things with you right now, but we're still working on some of the finer points. You'll have to wait. Please be patient, and I'll share those with you as soon as I can. Trust me, they are super exciting to me. Hopefully it's interesting to you, and we'll be able to allow me to bring you more great outdoors-based content. But for now, we've got 3 articles that I've written that I want to share with you for this month. The first is an article called The Ringneck Turkey. The ringneck turkey is a story about a gobbler that I bow killed a few years ago, and I won't spoil it entirely, but I ended up dancing with this bird in the woods before I completely dispatched it. A little embarrassing, but it's the truth. That's over on a website called Clearwater Sky. It's clearwatersky.com. Look in the blog section. It's called The Ringneck Turkey. The second piece is an experiment that I unintentionally ran. I let a doe that I bow killed at the end of deer season this year, I let it age for 21 days, not on purpose. Read the 21-day venison aging experiment. That's at the Gear Up blog on RedsGear.com. Some things that I learned, some things I wish I would have done differently. By far, the longest that I've ever let a piece of meat age. So that's the 21-day venison aging experiment at the Gear Up blog at RedsGear.com. And finally, also at the Gear Up blog on RedsGear.com, the Gobbler Guide to Concealment, how to fool the wary and ever-scanning peepers of a springtime gobbler. Not only are there tactics, but there are also gear recommendations in there. Check that out. That's again over at the Gear Up blog on RedsGear.com. That's what's cooking this month. Stay tuned next month, and I think I'll have a few more developments to share with you. All right, my guest today is Nate Anderson. Nate is with headhangers.com. Nate, would you tell us a little bit about what Head Hangers is and how it came to be?
So, Tim, Head Hangers is the simplest, easiest way to hang your European mounted skulls on the wall. We also have a tabletop version, too. What's different about it is you have no altercations to the skull whatsoever. You don't have to do anything. It's one screw into the wall. Can't hardly beat it.
It looks like a pretty simple deal. Maybe talk to us about the materials, and it looks essentially like a really rugged hook.
You're basically right. It's one piece of steel with one bend in it. They're powder coated, so they're durable. We've got several different colors to choose from. It's basically just a hook on your wall. We've had people buy them for bow hangers. They hang their hats, coats, whatever they want on them.
Absolutely. So people can find you at headhangers.com. How about talking to us about the genesis of your company? Because it's kind of a cool, like, bootstrap story.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was I was cleaning European skulls for some friends of mine. Luke had been making a hanger. My partner had been making a hanger similar to what we have now. We altered it a little bit and finally came up with what we have now, basically, after a few modifications. I asked him why he wasn't selling them, and he said, I have no idea where to start. So I was in sales already, so I helped him out. We've got this thing rolling. We've been doing this for a full year now and just having a ball.
That's like the quintessential American story. Talk to us about pricing and what people get for what they pay.
So the original deer hanger is $15. We do have the white ones on sale for the show that are $10. We also have pink and tan, $15. We have a bigger size for elk, buffalo, moose. They all look great on them. They're $20. And then we have a tabletop version as well, and they're going for $30 right now.
Great. Well, these things look rugged. They look really sleek. If you're looking for something to display your European mount skull, these really can't be beat. And you're also supporting a great kind of American story, starting up a business and making something work. So, Nate, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, Tim.
And that's headhangers.com. Headhangers is with a Z, headhangers.com. Thousands, back before the iPad was even an inkling in Steve Jobs' mind. The ThinkPad, IBM's workhorse of a laptop, probably ruined the backs of so many people. We have it here with us. We're going to see if the arrow deflects if it gets partial penetration or we get total pass-through on the IBM ThinkPad. Let's take a listen to see what happens. It's windy. That was the false start. That was just the wind. Oh, no way. This thing is way tougher than I would have ever believed. So I shot the laptop with the case closed, and I got penetration through the screen. Let's see if we can open this thing up, if it'll open. I only got partial penetration. That's kind of the headline here. Oh! I shot my P. My P and my backspacer are gone. The tip of the broadhead completely punctured the LCD screen, busted a few keys off, but that's as far as it got. So this was 20 yards. My bow's right around 60 pounds of draw weight, and that's will it kill it? And yeah, it did kill it with partial penetration. Wow, what a show today, guys. I hope you feel more ready for the upcoming turkey season, because that interview with Ray was awesome. If that doesn't get your blood pumping for hearing gobbling, I don't know what will. Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I was glad to have you along for the ride. But before we run out of daylight, I just want to say how thankful I am to you for listening. In May, Mark Drury from Drury Outdoors will be switching hats and going from show announcer to guest, and I can't wait for you to hear that interview. Now, if you want to get the show delivered automatically to you as soon as it airs each month, be sure to subscribe via iTunes or Android. Those links are in the show notes and on thethinkingwoodsman.com. You can also follow on Facebook and Twitter and Periscope. My handle on both of those platforms is @Woodsman'sWords. On Facebook, just look for The Thinking Woodsman. Okay, well, it looks like we've run out of daylight now, and it's time to climb down out of the stand. For the Thinking Woodsman podcast from the RedsGear.com studio, this is your buddy Tim Chelsvik reminding you that I think it's time you got outdoors.
You're listening to the Thinking Woodsman podcast.